Hello and welcome to another edition of Agenda here on TV3. I am Joseph Akable. There's a lot to talk about tonight because of a bit of a disturbing incident that occurred over the weekend. It's one that we have seen happen many times, but we more or less see it in one light or the other, but it presents a very serious challenge on our hands. And as a nation, we have to discuss it and find a way of dealing with it once and for all. We are talking about civilian interference when there is road accidents. And what we've seen play out, broadly, we can categorize it in three ways. I mean, first, there are those who, when accidents occur, out of a desire to intervene and help, they go over there and assist those individuals. There are those who also, when accidents do occur, they simply go in with the aim of looting, taking items that have been left by those who are in that uncomfortable position, battling for their lives. We've seen instances where people go in and take alcohol that is available, people siphon fuel. We'll bring you a bit of all those visuals to paint a picture of the situation that we are dealing with at hand. Then there's a third group of individuals who simply go in with their mobile phones with the aim of filming what is happening. So one of such visuals is on your screens right about now. It's an accident that occurred, and those are the spoils, if you can put it that way, of the accident that had taken place. And you can see the woman opening the beer bottle and pouring it into the bucket that she's holding. I mean, it's not clear whether she intends to sell it or she's basically taking it away so that she uses it for whatever purpose. And you see other individuals as well feasting on the beer that is available. Right there and then, they've turned the accident scene, the accident site, into a mini beer bar of sorts and enjoying the drinks that are available to them at this point in time. I mean, a lot of these ones, we see them on social media and we all laugh about them. Let's look at the ones that have to do with siphoning fuel. I mean, because those ones are very disturbing ones that we all must be worried about. In fact, there have been instances where you have a gas tanker very basically conveying an LPG that has falling off the road, falling down, and people are moving close to it. So here on your screens now, you see again the visuals there. They are siphoning the fuel following an accident that has taken place. And for many of us who will be watching some of these videos, you'll be asking yourself that what should happen if there's some ignition somewhere? What should happen if there's a spark? What should happen if there is an explosion? You know, and it presents major challenges. And we see that there are some men in uniform around them as they are undertaking this particular activity. We've seen it happen a number of times, and people with buckets, gallons, picking up the fuel. I mean, there are questions even to be asked whether you can see the police officer there, there's fire service official also telling them to move back. The individuals are simply refusing. They are holding their gallons and they are moving forward towards them. It's a very disturbing scenario that we see in our society and when accidents happen. And it's one that we have to talk about and deal with it once and for all, because the experts will tell you that it's not safe, and we have experts who will be joining us this evening to discuss this all-important matter, just to try and find a way around it and what could be done about it. So the topic for this evening is the rising danger of civilian interference in road accidents. And joining me for the discussion this morning, Kwame Kodua Etua Hene. He is Director Regulations, Inspections and Compliance with the National Road Safety Authority. He's joining us this evening for this discussion. Senior, good evening.
Good evening, Joe.
Thank you very much for joining us. Just by way of disclosure, Mr. Chiane taught me at the law faculty, so he's my former lecturer. Once a lecturer, always a lecturer, so I have to acknowledge that as we start the discussion. So, Senior, thank you very much for joining us. And I want to start off with, I mean, because you work with the Road Safety Authority and what you witness and what you see, is this something that would say is a one-off, or is something that you tend to receive a lot of reports of in terms of it happening whenever we have accidents taking place?
Well, Joe, thanks. Good evening. And it's sad I couldn't join yourself and my other colleagues in studio. Next year, I will try and do better. I think generally, when you look at the trends of crashes, until recently, I would say about a year or two, the rate of crashes involving these trucks or tankers were not pretty much in the picture, but gradually they are beginning to occur, and it's beginning to create a bit of concern for us. I mean, those of us in the safety environment. The whole matter of accidents. I mean, we say road traffic crashes. If you have experienced one or have had the benefit or the unpleasant experience of observing one, though the reality is that it is quite traumatic, very chaotic, and it requires some level of time sensitive countermeasures so that the least obstruction you would want to experience is one that is becoming the trend in recent times. I mean, when it occurs, you need the police to be on site, those engaged in rescue mission, some medics who have some expertise to help. Because, when we account for road traffic crashes in terms of the statistics, beyond the account of casualties on the day or at the time of the incident, there's always a 30-day cycle. And in that, we have found that oftentimes, in the midst of trying to help, others get into very difficult situations and secondary collision, and sometimes they complicate matters. But it is becoming more worrying when it's got to do with fuel tankers because of the other related consequences that may flow from these crashes. So yes, I mean, to make the point that it's beginning to emerge. Last year or two, there was one that involved Goyle. We had reason to conduct some investigation or engage them to try to understand the matters very closely, and the ones that have occurred within the last few days. So I think it raises the reason, or it creates the condition, I should say, for us to be getting pretty closer to our folks in that sector in order to manage the events that are beginning to create problems for all of us.
I mean, in practical terms, what could we possibly do to, I mean, as a means of the starting point dealing with it? And I'm asking within the context that a lot of the times, especially some of these accidents that take place out of the capital cities, you mostly not have our security agencies being the first responders. You would have other individuals being the first responders. What could we practically begin to do about it as a way of stemming the tide?
Okay, so from our side, I think about 7 or 8 years back, following some assistance we got from it must have been the European Union or World Bank, we set up first aid or emergency post at some very challenging, accident-prone locations. And what we did was to try and train volunteers within these corridors in order that when these crashes occur, based on the knowledge that they have. In fact, that was a collaboration between the authority and Ghana Red Cross Society and I believe other partners. The intention was to be able to build the manpower so that in real time when the crashes occur, even before bystanders, some of whom are well intended but do not have the skill set, before they take over the rescue quote and unquote mission, these trained, skilled hands may be able to turn the tide even before the police and the professionals arrive. Unfortunately, I mean, it's been a while. When you train volunteers with time out of urbanization and the likes, people move, and you would have to retrain, recruit and retrain. I think that has been the gap as far as that initiative was concerned. But on a larger scale, we're hoping that we'll be able to set up more of such first aid posts in order for us to be able to manage these incidents. Beyond that, the other players within the public sector environment are folks from the Ghana National Fire Service, National Ambulance Service. In fact, within the national strategy for managing these incidents, there is the emergency subgroup, and we work very closely to be able to improve upon the response time and work with other partners to manage the immediate effect as and when they occur.
Senior, I'll have you hold on a bit for me. Let me bring into the conversation DO2 Desmond Aka. He's Head of Public Relations, Ghana National Fire Service. Sir, thank you very much for joining us as well. I want to start off finding out from you, because your men more often than not are the first responders to some of these accident sites. I was trying to find out from Mr. Kodua how widespread we see that happening. In fact, some of the visuals, maybe we can roll some of the visuals right now. There was one, the beer one. I mean, it's just an accident, a truck that is carrying beer. You have people going all over and having a whole session on their own. You also have instances where, so in this instance, this is what is happening here. I mean, your men go to the scenes first. Is this something that often happens, or is just because of someone said the few instances that we take videos and put on social media that go viral?
Right. So first of all, let me say a very good evening to your cherished viewers. And then let me also say a very good evening to you.
Good evening.
This particular accident does not quite happen often. But unfortunately, when it happens, it appears we tend to lose we tend to lose ourselves and think that nothing would happen. And therefore, people feel that when they find themselves in a group, they are kind of safe and would want to copy each other and therefore neglect their own safety. And I think as a nation, that is what is really hurting us. People do not prioritize their safety and therefore would want to risk it all, even though they know the real risks associated with getting closer to such scenes. We have had instances where we have had mass casualty as far as such incidents are concerned. I remember years ago, somewhere around Kintampo, where it all started. That is where I really got to know how dangerous this particular incident is. Because when it happened, people rushed in.
What type of fuel tanker? Okay.
It was a petrol tanker. I think it fell into a ditch, and people felt they could cash in, and then they rushed with their gallons and what have you. And then as a result, a little spark created an explosion, and a lot of people died. Years ago, I don't know whether you remember.
I remember that incident.
Since then, there has been some few incidents where people have also died as a result. So it appears that we, as a regulator, have done a lot of education. We've done a lot of engagement, especially with the tanker drivers, with the public. We've gone to institutions and what have you. But I think by and large, this is also driven by perceived poverty in the system. Once people feel, oh, this is an opportunity for us to cash in, then what would rush into their mind is that, oh, once there is this incident, let me rush and then try to cash in. And then there is also one other aspect that is also, I think it is also has to do with culture. Sometimes we feel that psychologically, once we are able to get a gallon of fuel or get a gallon of petrol, it is more important than our lives. And therefore, no matter what, sometimes you get to the scene, the crowds are so overwhelming that it becomes virtually impossible for you to have a divided attention than to deal with them and to also focus on managing the spillage and then ensuring that the risk of fire or explosion doesn't occur. And that is how it becomes very difficult for us as emergency responders to combine those two things. But even at such incidents, our roles are cut out, whereby we are supposed to do what we call extrication, because sometimes these accidents lead to entrapment of the victims, maybe the driver or the mate because of the crash, will be found in a situation where they cannot even escape, and therefore we would have to extricate them. So we cannot get to a scene looking at the crowd, looking at the risks available, would want to leave trying to contain the situation or manage the spillage, trying to prevent the explosion or fire, as well as extricating to save lives. So these are three things that we concentrate on. So it behoves on our neighbors or our brothers and the police to provide scene security. But because of sometimes the overwhelming number of people that throng the scene, it becomes very difficult for us to do that. And that is how come people have taken an opportunity or advantage in siphoning fuels at such dangerous situations. So not until we come to terms as a people that such situations or such environment are dangerous, looking at the risks, because there could be fire, there could be explosion, there could be secondary explosions, whereby when it happens, a lot of people could be affected. And not until we come to terms that, I mean, this is so dangerous and therefore we wouldn't venture, it will become very difficult. But we as regulators will continue to do our best and ensure that such explosions do not occur.
I mean, generally in terms of response time, I mean, there are those who attribute the situation to the response time, that a lot of the times the security services don't get to the site early enough. And so people, more or less, by the time you get there, they take over the site. Do you think that contributes, aside from the factors that you have alluded to so far?
Well, response time is key because for such incidents, because of the highly volatile product that we're talking about, petrol, diesel. In fact, if you look at the flash points of petrol, it is way below the freezing point. And therefore, at even negative 43 degrees Celsius, at that low temperature, with the slightest spark, fire could occur. And then if intervention is not even brought in as quickly as possible, then the explosion would occur. So many a times, the incident do occur for several minutes before we are called in. For now, the challenge has always been the use of technology. If we are able to incorporate technology in trying to kind of map the whole of the country to know the exact point of these accidents, it helps us to also respond quickly. And then there is also this challenge of proximity. You know, it is not everywhere that we find ourselves. And therefore, sometimes depending on where the incident occurs, it becomes very difficult for us to respond within the first 5 minutes. So if the incident is reported early enough, and then depending on the responding fire station, the nearest fire station, the distance to cover, that will determine when we will get there to be able to intervene with our specific responses. For instance, in conducting extrication, in managing the spillage, and in controlling the situation in such a way that there wouldn't be fire. So many a times, for instance, let me give you a typical example, like what happened last Saturday. Along the Suhum in Sawam Accra Highway. It happened, let's say, around 4 a.m. It got to us 45 minutes after the incident had happened. And it took us roughly 20 minutes because of proximity. And therefore, by the time we got there, the situation has really escalated. And you know, anytime there is fuel spillage, it travels easily along the route. And then it also destroys the environment. Wherever it goes, it has its own damaging effect. And therefore, once the spark happens, wherever the fuel has leaked to, there is what we call flashback. It will go to that path and then return to the source. And when it returns and no intervention is given within the shortest possible time, that is where explosion would occur. And therefore, in as much as it took us 20 minutes to get there, we were able to arrive before explosion could occur. Other than that, even the damage that we saw could have been more than what we experienced. And therefore, it has also become imperative that as a nation, we need to prioritize our emergency responders, i.e. Ghana National Fire Service, ambulance, the police, because these are the three critical agencies when it comes to managing accidents. And therefore, if at every vantage distance or point along our major highways, we have a joint unit or a combined unit whereby in case of any emergency of that nature, we could respond effectively. One other factor too that happens is that because we always respond in limited numbers, sometimes depending on the situation, we would need backup, reinforcement. And therefore, when the reinforcement comes, we are in a better position to be able to manage the crowds. And because of the distances, we are not able to get the reinforcement in due time. And that is what has really hampered our effectiveness on the ground. And like I said, because it's a cultural thing and we don't value our own life, and safety has not been given a lot of premium in this particular country, it appears that when the crowds build up, they even override or they disregard cordoning of the space, and therefore they would even venture into the hot zone with less recourse to their own safety. So the challenges are intertwined, and not until we are able to resource the first responders and be able to kind of provide the first responder with the needed logistics and to come up to sort of open more fire stations, more police stations, especially along our major highways. This particular issue is going to persist. And I think it is high time we are also able to incorporate technology. And for us in the fire service, we are particularly happy that very soon we are launching a particular program whereby it will make it seamless for people to even get access to our services at the convenience, at their own convenience, where there will be an app or there could be a digital platform where they could report such incidents, where we would mount cameras all over the country, whereby we'll be able to detect emergencies happening even without somebody alerting us. So now the challenge has always been somebody would have to call. And then culturally, now we think that such incidents too becomes a place where we can also generate content. So people are happy to take their phones and then even record to share what is going on without giving more recourse to ethical considerations and other legal ramifications when it comes to sharing of such sensitive content. Because sometimes you could see people burning and all that, and you see people filming and other things. So I think that is also another angle that we can also look at. So as a people, we have to be able to do a lot of education. And there are gaps when it comes to us conducting regular education, prepping them. But be as it may, we will continue on that tangent to be able to deal with the ignorance in that space so as to help our people come to terms with the dangers of harming themselves when they get into contact with such incidents.
I'll come back to you. Let me return to Mr. Tuahine on Zoom. And Mr. Tuahine, I want to take off from the point about the inter-agency collaboration that he was making a point about. Because a lot of these videos that we tend to see, in fact, the video from the weekend, you could clearly see the police and the fire service officials asking the crowd to move backwards, and they were still coming around them. I mean, they don't have the numbers. I mean, if it's the fire service that gets to the site, the first instance, they do not have enough numbers. If it's the police, the same thing. The crowd eventually overpowers them. I mean, technology definitely is one way, but what's your own suggestion in terms of how to ensure prompt interagency presence at some of these scenes just to avert the situation completely?
Oh, thank you very much. I must say that the Ghana Fire Service needs to be commended, not just for the events of the last weekend, but at previous times when similar events have occurred, in spite of the constraints that are pretty public, they do their best to get to the incident scene in good time. I mean, we could all do better. But given our our general constraints, there's a need to appreciate what they do. Though I think that for starters, the public must begin to appreciate their role. In other words, when they occur, and there's a point you made. Sometimes, even with the limited manpower that shows up, you have a lot of bystanders creating one level of obstruction or the other to the work of these medics and these professionals. And in those circumstances, as I said from the beginning, it is pretty time sensitive. Every minute that you fail to put to good use, as far as rescue efforts are concerned, I mean, you put another life in danger. And more importantly, when it's got to do with inflammables. So the people must begin to be sensitized so that they begin to see these incidents as one of a high risk to their own lives. To the rest of my knowledge, we are told that when these incidents occur within a radius of about 1.5 kilometers, if there is an explosion, nobody is safe. So that if members of the public are aware that, oh, if you approach these tankers to siphon fuel for whatever purpose, some of which are pretty unnecessary, maybe they will begin to put on their sense of reasoning or common sense, if I'm permitted to say that. Or if those who obstruct lawful police and fire service operations in the course of these rescue missions have their day with the enforcement officers for one reason or the other, even if they were to be cautioned and publicized. Tomorrow when it occurs and I'm approaching these sites, I would have to think through it in order that I do not obstruct the work they do. But basically, beyond the technology that my friends speak of, I mean, it's obvious that we must begin to take emergency services serious. A lot of the numbers we record occur out of secondary matters, not the initial collision. So if we are unable to get on site in real time, or we get there but we are unable to provide the necessary assistance that is required of us, there are those that we may not be able to save, and they account for the casualty numbers. And at the end of the day, I mean, the implications are far-reaching. So there is the need for that deeper collaboration. And as I indicated, within the national framework, in fact, there's a National Road Safety Strategy 4 document, which is a national safety plan. And in that, there is the emergency service expectation. I mean, top of it is the efforts that we all need to put into these matters to be able to reduce the response time. My friend rightly said, an incident may occur, and the closest fire service station you may find to the incident may be 1 kilometer or more apart. And in fact, that when they even get to know, at what point do they even get to be informed that there's an incident that requires their assistance? So whilst we provide technology with a view to hasten knowledge and information sharing, it's also important that the resources are made available. I mean, today we have a number of ambulance services, and we can do better to increase upon the numbers, do better to increase the number of first aid posts, at least in the areas that are noted for high crashes. And this data is available. In fact, there's data that speaks to what we call the black spot or high incident corridors, either on the Accra Kumasi to Tamale stretch, Accra Cape Coast, Elubu, Accra Volta, Ho, or Aflao, that stretch. Those points have been marked out, and we need to now have to find the means to be able to build the strategy and the resources in order for us to deal with these matters when they occur. But beyond that, I think that there must be consequence for our actions. those who film, again, if some of them are aware that their conduct may have some consequences or ramifications, maybe they would use their phone very usefully, in the sense that when you watch the news around, it is pretty much for attention. I mean, most of these filming and posting are for attention seekers. I mean, it is not to bring any matter to the attention of the duty bearers, and there are consequences for some of these conducts. So those who obstruct and those who unlawfully take pictures and share without the intention of assisting rescue missions and the likes, at the very least, when they receive some invitation from the police and begin to answer one question or the other, even without the intent of taking the subsequent steps, and these matters are published, in the worst case, if others suffer the pain of their irresponsible conduct, tomorrow when it occurs and I hear the explosion, I know that my presence will not be required at the incident, at the place of the incident. And if for any reason I need to provide any support, maybe I should be seeking direction as to what the emergency numbers are and what can I do to get the unpleasant news to the attention of the rescue officers. That I think we must begin to do in order that our people will begin to act responsibly for their own good and for the greater good of the society.
You're still live here on Agenda on TV3. So far, we are having a conversation about the involvement of civilians, particularly when accidents do occur. We'll take our first break. When we come back, we'll zoom into a second aspect of the conversation. We've talked about the instances where there is clear and obvious danger, but people, for their own selfish interest, want to gain. There's the second aspect, those who go in with the aim of helping, but the experts will say that sometimes that could also be dangerous, not just for those they are trying to help, but they themselves as well. We'll have a discussion on that when we come back right after this break. It's agenda, and we're having a conversation about the rising danger of civilian interference in road accidents. My guest tonight, Kwame Kodu-Etuahene, Director Regulations, Inspections and Compliance at the National Road Safety Authority. He's joining us on Zoom. We also have DO2 Desmond Aka, Head of Public Relations, Ghana National Fire Service, also in the studio with me as well. And sir, before we went on the break, I was making a point about those who go in with the intention of helping. In fact, the incident that you alluded to that occurred over the weekend, we saw the initial video. There's one video, we are unable to confirm whether it's actually from that side, but we heard someone who appeared stuck in the vehicle saying that, stop filming and come and help us. You know, what generally is your preferred approach to the first responders who are not uniformed people like you when they get to the scene of some of these accidents that occur?
Well, so what we expect from the general public is that anytime they chance on such incidents, the best thing for them to do is to relay to us, to reach out to us on our emergency number, the national emergency number, which is 112. The reason why we want them to relay such incident to us is that we are the professionals. We have the trained hands. We have the needed equipment to be able to perform extrication, to be able to save lives. And because they do not have the expertise, sometimes, even though they may have the right kind of mindset or heart to help, but because they are not professionals, they lack the needed competencies, they may end up, using crude methods in trying to rescue the victim. And in such manner, they have even aggravated the injuries of such persons. And therefore, in as much as we are trying to even train what we term as community first responders, there are plans, collaboratively with the other agencies to train volunteers with the needed tools and knowledge to be able to respond in such manners. In fact, just as my other colleague alluded to the fact that there is data, and therefore we are trying to train such volunteers along such hotspots, such major highways where most of these incidents occur, such that once they are trained, they will be given at least some form of knowledge to be able to go about that. But in as much as they go about that form of assistance, they would have to even call us, so that by which time we will be there to professionally handle the situation. Because sometimes you need to even manage glasses. You need to be able to do what we call stabilization, because depending on the positioning of the crashed vehicle.
For some of the movies that we watch, the emergency ones, sometimes the experts will prefer metals not to be taken out of the bodies. They want to cut it and take it out together with the human being and everything.
So that we do not aggravate the situation. Because sometimes if the victim has an injury to the spine, if you don't handle him or her very well, you tend to cause more havoc. And even when they survive the incident, they may not have the opportunity to walk as before. And that is why we would want the general public, even though they may have the right intentions to help out, but they should quickly call us. The first point of call should be the Ghana National Fire Service. The reason being that we have the expertise to perform the extrication, to kind of rescue the trapped victims, to do stabilization, to manage spillage, and then also to prevent if there are secondary explosions or anything that will create fire condition. We are better able to deal with it. So that once we come in, we are able to do about 4 or 5 roles at the same time. And that makes it imperative that the Ghana National Fire Service become the first respondent at such emergency scene. It is also important that once you call us, you are also able to call either ambulance or the police, because the police would also have to come in and do scene security so that the crowd will not build up. Sometimes the people that come there out of curiosity, they want to find out what is happening so that probably they could also speak to it or what. But, the risks associated with emergency scenes are many, and therefore we would want the general public to stay clear of so as not to endanger their lives. So in as much as they may want to help, not until we give them adequate training, we still expect them to call us on our emergency number, which remains 112, as quickly as possible.
Finally, let's talk about the citizen journalists, like we call them. What has the experience been these days? When I was way younger growing up, it was not something that we saw often. When there was an accident and you got over to the scene, you saw what happened. The thing is to run around and find an adult and try. But these days, everyone gets there, and the first thing is to take out the mobile phone.
I think the advent of the mobile phones are helping us in so many ways. But we, as a people, in this part of our world, we are trying to abuse the phone. The danger in using even a phone at a crash scene involving a petrol tanker or fuel accident is that because of the volatility, the low flash point of these flammable material, your phone even becomes a source of ignition. Sometimes, even if you take something from your pocket and rub it, let's say in your trousers or in your clothing, there could be the generation of static electricity. And static electricity can generate electrons that are enough to even start a fire in such a volatile environment, such as petrol leakage. And therefore, that is why we do not want people to use their phone to even, at close range, to even take pictures of that nature. And then also, there is something that we, as in the media space, could do. For instance, to be able to hammer on the ethical consideration, because sometimes people would want to take advantage of the situation and create content instead of trying to help, even call the fire service. And many times, I also think that the ignorance out there is so huge, even though we are doing our best to educate. For them to even call the emergency number, a lot of people do not know. So I think a lot more would have to be done in that space. Once we are able to educate them, once they also come to terms to accept the educational content that we are churning out, I think it goes a long way to help us. And therefore, we need to be able to create more awareness on the need for people not to be able to film. Sometimes you would see that people are struggling, and to be able to even help out, or the best thing to do is to call. But, you know, people would feel reluctant to even call, but to even film and to break the news out there to make money or whatever. And I think as a people, we are losing it. And that is what we must all do as civil society, as regulators, and as advocates. We should be able to do more education in that line so that people would come to terms to help out when they chance on such emergencies.
We'll take our second break now. When we come back, then I'll return to Mr. Tuahine as we wrap up this all-important discussion. It's still live here on Agenda on TV3. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for staying with us here on TV3. It's Agenda. We are discussing the involvement of citizens in accidents. And I have Mr. Tuahine still with me on Zoom as well. And Mr. Tuahine, in wrapping up the discussion, there are those who say that it's long overdue for us to begin to train citizens in terms of some basic form of assistance you can provide to people in need. I've been in a situation at a court complex where someone passed out, and basically a lot of us around, they don't seem to have an idea of what we should even do as a means of first aid.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I have equally observed drivers in distress on the motorway having to pull out their fire extinguishers without knowing how to even use them. And those who try to come to their aid even make matters worse. So yes, I agree. One of my friends made a point. In this country, it is regrettable to say that we do not take these matters serious. You see, safety in all facets, either at the workplace, on the road, domestically. These are matters that must be a part of our socialization process. We must find a way to incorporate it either into our curricula, or we must find ways to make it a matter of priority, so that at any step of the way when we are in difficulty, at least we'll have the basics to be able to help. In the past, as part of driver training, I think there was a discussion around creating a model on it to make it mandatory. But beyond that, all of us, all of us, we must begin to embrace these knowledge in order that when calamity strikes, we'll be able to provide one assistance or the other. But to the point my other colleague made on the filming, I just say that not too many people have paid attention, Joe. But I think that within the new legislative regime regarding data protection,
Yeah.
I want to believe that images and videos may come under personal data, under the Data Protection Act, so that if you should take a photograph or a video of a person that is well identifiable, you may be flirting with that law. And it becomes more sensitive when there are matters of injury, his medical condition, and the likes. So maybe you and I, as part of what we do, we must also begin to deepen the knowledge base so that when society begins to be aware that the things they take for granted have serious ramifications in law, maybe they will think twice when they pick up their phones to begin to film with a view to generate some likes or attention on social media. Because for me, I think that's part of the problem. A few times we have observed these incidents, even aside the tanker issues, normal crashes, when you expect that the public will not show up and rather channel their energies to provide the means for the experts to be there, you always find more than enough people populating around crashes and having to use their phones to take very needless photographs for God knows what they intend to do with them. So one, I agree that the education bit must be taken serious at all levels. We never stop learning even at the university level. And at the basics, we must find a way to incorporate these matters as part of our socialization process. When the kids grow up, knowing the basics of safety of all facets or of all shapes and forms and practice it, we'll be able to build the capacity to a certain level to support the experts as and when these matters do occur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Etuahine. We'll leave it here for now. Mr. Kwame Kodu Etuahine is Director at Regulations, Inspections and Compliance at the National Road Safety Authority. Leonard Senior, thank you so much for joining us this evening on Agenda. Let me wrap up with DO2 Desmond Aka in studio with me. Final word of advice. In fact, one of our viewers sent an interesting message about how this is very informative for him in terms of some of the things he's learning this evening. He says, excellent contributions from everyone tonight. I suggest we introduce more education on this issue in schools. I recently saw a very good educational cartoon on the Fire Service X page, and I believe content like this should be broadcast on national television to help prevent crowd build-up. Interesting suggestion that you are making there, but that's what we're having at this discussion. Mr. Aka, I'll give you the final word.
Right. So what I would want to say is that there are legal frameworks that kind of prohibit obstruction and then moving to such things to create disorder. And therefore, if we think that the laws are weak, we need to strengthen it such that it will be punitive enough so that we can punish people to serve as deterrent for others who may want to rush to scenes to steal. Because one thing we should bear in mind is that going to a crash scene and then tampering with fuel amounts to theft, and that is illegal. And apart from it being illegal, getting to the scene, filming, obstructing emergency respondents in their line of duty is also illegal.
Maybe we should start with some arrests here and there.
So
Let's see.
we would want to appeal to our brothers and sisters in the police to be able to enforce that particular law. And then if we think that what we have currently is not punitive enough, we should be able to make it more biting such that it will serve as a deterrent for others. And then on the education base, we even started, I think last year, we were able to collaborate with Ghana Education Service and then Ulster University to develop a curriculum that would incorporate safety at the basic school level. Because we believe that we need to start at a very early stage so that the next generation will grow and to accept safety as a lifestyle. So we would continue in that tangent. And then I also believe that we need to scale it up. We need to be able to be well-resourced, to be able to cover the entire regions or the spaces available to do more public education, create more awareness for people to come to terms that, rushing to such crashings could endanger their lives. So we would continue to do that so that instances where we have to tell them to keep a safe distance, call us early, avoid filming, showing certain sensitive parts, creating content will be a thing of the past. Once we are able to do this, and as a country, we need to prioritize our safety and resource emergency responders, especially the Ghana National Fire Service. Once we have the needed equipment, we are located at vantage points, which will make our response time very, very very, very sharp. Then it means that we'll be in a position to respond quickly to save more lives and to also safeguard property.
All right. Thank you very much, DO2 Desmond Aka is the head of public relations at the Ghana National Fire Service. Kwame Koduetua, Director of Regulations, Inspections and Compliance of the Ghana National Road Safety Authority, also joined us for this all-important discussion. There's a lot to pick from this discussion today. The substantive points being that you have to think about your lives a bit more than we do sometimes when we have these emergency situations on our hands. It's not an opportunity to steal from the accident scene or try and make merry like we saw some of our compatriots do with the beer that was available, among other things. This all time would allow us on this edition of Agenda here on TV3. I am Joseph Akable. Up next is Ghana Tonight. There's a lot to discuss on Ghana Tonight. There's an update from the Foreign Ministry in relation to the Russian national that was here in the country, the viral videos and everything. Alfred Okanse and team are standing by. They also bring you an update on the Burkina Bay situation with regards to our compatriots, those who have been able to come into the country, the death toll, what the government is doing about that, plus the debate that took place in Parliament today about the cocoa politics. Stay tuned in to TV3. Ghana Tonight is up next.